Today, we're tackling, well, a pretty explosive question in international diplomacy. What is the most idiotic speech ever delivered by a president at the UN General Assembly? Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, and it's a tough one. We've got a stack of critiques, fact checks, diplomatic analyses, really trying to figure this out.
Exactly. It's not just about pointing fingers. We
Yeah.
need a framework, right? How do you even judge the worst speech? Is it diplomatic recklessness, factual errors, just sheer confrontation?
Right, and idiotic, well, it's highly subjective. That's why our mission today is to look closely at two really strong contenders, both from President Donald Trump, actually,
His 2017 maiden address.
and that sprawling convention-breaking speech in 2025.
So we're not just looking for the shock value. We're looking at the kind of damage. Was it the immediate risk, like maybe starting a conflict?
Like with reckless threats.
Or was it more systemic, undermining science, rejecting cooperation, that kind of thing?
That's the core tension, I think. Aggressive threats versus just sweeping denials of, well, reality and consensus. That's what we need to unpack for you.
Okay, so let's start with the precedent. 2017. That speech really set a tone, didn't it?
Oh, immediately. Sources say it just broke presidential norms right out of the gate. Diplomats saw it as dangerously provocative.
And the tone itself.
Yeah.
The analysis we have compares it less to other U.S. presidents and more to, well, figures known for being really aggressive.
Yeah, like Fidel Castro or Nikita Khrushchev. That's quite a comparison for a U.S. president at the UN.
Definitely not the usual diplomatic language.
Yeah.
And the big moment everyone remembers.
The threat. The threat to totally destroy North Korea. I mean, saying that from the UN rostrum, it was just unprecedented in modern diplomacy. Caused a real shockwave.
And the timing made it even more stark, right?
Absolutely striking. It happened literally minutes after the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, had just finished his speech.
Where he was appealing for calmer words.
Exactly. Warning that, and this is almost a direct quote, fiery talk can lead to fatal misunderstandings. And then boom.
The contrast must have been incredibly jarring in the room.
It was. The critiques we looked at noted that when the president paused, expecting applause maybe, there was just this uneasy silence.
A clear signal from the other diplomats.
Yeah, a strong indicator of just how uncomfortable they were. So 2017 really defined diplomatic failure as, high-risk military threats.
Okay, but then fast forward 8 years, 2025, and we get a totally different kind of, well, failure.
Completely different. This one was more about dismantling consensus, attacking facts.
And just the format itself was a statement, wasn't it? UN speeches are usually, 15 minutes?
Roughly, yeah. This 2025 address went on for nearly an hour.
An hour. Wow.
Yeah, and the sources described it as feeling less like diplomacy and more like a political rally, just airing domestic grievances on the world stage.
But the core damage, you're saying, was the rejection of consensus, particularly on the environment.
That was central. It wasn't just, awkward phrasing. It was a wholesale rejection of scientific reality. And he delivered it to nations literally on the front lines of climate change.
So what was the specific language? How did he frame that rejection?
Well, he explicitly called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion.
Con job. That's blunt.
Extremely. And he went further, labeling UN climate predictions as the product of stupid people who've cost countries fortunes. He urged nations to abandon the green scam.
Saying that to leaders whose countries are potentially drowning. That must have landed harshly. Did the analysts note specific reactions?
They did. The Associated Press pointed out that leaders from those vulnerable nations were right there watching. Ambassador Ilana Said of Palau, she leads the small island states group. She's in the room. And Del Thomas, a climate scientist from the Bahamas, she spoke later about how personal these climate disasters are. She mentioned experiencing Hurricane Sandy's devastation firsthand.
So you have people living it.
Exactly. And they're being told their reality, their crisis, is a con job. It's a profound disconnect.
And this denial, it wasn't just about the science, was it? It extended to the solutions, like clean energy.
Precisely. He didn't just dismiss the problem. He dismissed the fixes. He called wind power a joke. Pathetic.
This joke.
Yep, claimed renewables just don't work and are way too expensive. The implication was clear. Going green means economic ruin.
Now, it's easy to write that off as just political rhetoric, but the fact checks, they tell a different story on the economics, don't they?
They absolutely do. The counter-evidence is pretty stark. UN and IRENA reports, for instance, consistently state solar and wind are almost always the cheapest and fastest options for new electricity globally.
Almost always the cheapest.
And get this, Other fact checks showed over 90% of new renewable projects are now cheaper than building new fossil fuel plants. Solar PV, on average, 41% cheaper.
41% cheaper.
That's a
That's a huge gap between the claim and the data.
massive disconnect. He also made claims about household costs, remember, saying U.S. electricity bills were coming way down.
Well, Europe's were supposedly soaring because of green policies.
Right. But the data contradicts that, too. U.S. retail electricity prices, they've actually gone up faster than inflation since 2022.
Faster than inflation. Okay.
And while Europe definitely has complex energy challenges, like, old buildings dealing with hotter summers, blaming it all on green policies while ignoring the U.S. reality, it was misleading.
So we've got the factual denial, the policy dismissal. But the 2025 speech also got personal, didn't it? Very confrontational toward other leaders.
Oh, deeply. Brutally so, according to the sources. The language on migration was incredibly inflammatory.
What did he say?
He urged nations right there in the hall to close borders, expel foreigners, warning them, quote, "Your countries are going to hell."
Going to hell.
To their faces.
Yep.
And he specifically accused European countries of destroying your heritage because of their migration policies.
That kind of language. It clearly plays to a domestic base, right? But as diplomacy, do the analyses say anything about the diplomatic cost versus the political gain back home?
The consensus seems to be it just completely undermined the whole point of being there. It wasn't effective diplomacy. And he didn't just target leaders, he went after the UN itself.
What was the main critique of the UN?
His recurring line was that the UN just writes strongly worded letters, offers empty words, and isn't acting. He said the organization is not even coming close to living up to its potential.
But then, classic contradiction, right?
Yeah.
Harsh words in public.
And then a much softer tone in private. Yeah. Shortly after blasting the institution, he apparently told Secretary General Guterres that the U.S. is behind the United Nations 100%.
100%, after calling it ineffective.
Remarkable disconnect, isn't it, between the public show and the private reassurance?
He also made some big claims about his foreign policy achievements in that speech. Something about ending wars.
Ah, yes. The claim he ended 7 unendable wars in just 8 months.
7 wars in 8 months. That sounds ambitious. What did the fact-checkers say?
PolitiFact looked into it and rated it mostly false.
Mostly false. Okay.
Basically, while U.S. involvement did help ease tensions in some places, like between India and Pakistan or Armenia and Azerbaijan, many of the agreements were described as fragile or interim. The analysts felt the claim really overstated the U.S. role and how ended these conflicts actually were.
Okay, so let's pull it together. We have these 2 speeches, both seen as deeply flawed, but flawed in very different ways.
Yeah.
2017, military recklessness. 2025, scientific denial, diplomatic hostility. How did the analyst ultimately compare them when asking which was, well, the most idiotic?
It really boils down to your criteria, doesn't it? If idiotic means putting the world at immediate high risk, like potentially triggering a nuclear conflict,
Then the 2017 threat to totally destroy a country?
is kind of unparalleled in its acute, immediate danger. That was a threat to actual lives, potentially millions.
Right.
But if idiotic means a complete systemic rejection of everything the UN stands for: cooperation, diplomacy, established scientific reality.
Then 2025 looks different.
Exactly. The wholesale climate denial, attacking core global agreements, telling leaders their countries are going to hell, that's a rejection of the entire diplomatic project. It attacks the very function of the assembly.
So, considering those different types of damage, what's the overall takeaway from the observers? Is there a lean one way or the other?
Well, based on the material we reviewed, the consensus among many observers seems to be leaning towards the 2025 speech as potentially contending for that title of most idiotic UNGA speech ever.
Really? More so than the direct military threat?
Potentially, yes. Because of its confrontational nature, its sheer length breaking all norms, and crucially, its systemic dismissal of established global science on issues affecting everyone. It wasn't just a rogue threat, it was an attempt to undermine the shared reality the UN is built on. It rejected the whole ethos.
That is a stark difference.
Yeah.
Acute threat versus this long-term systemic undermining. And both speeches, as you said, felt more like rallies for a home audience than actual diplomacy.
Which leads us to the final thought we want to leave you with. Building on that idea of playing to the base, which poses the greater long-term risk to global stability. Is it a president issuing dangerous, potentially escalatory military threats to foreign powers?
Or,
Or is it a president using that same international stage to intentionally try and dismantle decades of established scientific and diplomatic consensus, perhaps purely for domestic political gain? That's a really tough question, and maybe one only you, the informed listener, can truly explore.
a lot to think about indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.